Hello, and welcome to Let the Growth Flow, a spiritual place to heal mind, body, and soul. My name is Alexis, and I will be your host. My hope for this podcast is to help people learn about all things spiritual, at the same time, allowing themselves to heal in any way that they need to. I plan to do that by sharing my own spiritual experiences, as well as bringing other spiritual mentors onto the show. So, for this first episode, I kind of want to just start at the beginning of my story. So, I'm currently 23 years old and I am living in Huntington Beach, California. But we're going to rewind to about a year ago, about March 13th ish, when quarantine first started. So, at the time, I was a teacher and we had just gone on spring break, and then everything kind of went up in flames here in the US, and we were put onto hard lockdown and quarantine. When that happened, it was a lot of unknowns. Basically, I wasn't working. I was just staying at home a lot, as everybody was, and having that time to be by myself, realize that I needed to find the hobbies and passions that I used to have as a kid, but had lost time and energy as an adult to do them. So I was getting back into yoga, riding my bike, getting outside more. I tried even doing puzzles, drawing, all the things, right? Well, throughout this time, I was having how do I want to say this? I was having some family fights, I guess I could say. And it was the first time in my life that I had felt distant from my family. So my family is very close. We talk every day. And this fighting was creating a lot of sadness for me. So not to mention the fact I'm not working, not having a lot to do. This whole year has been traumatic for all of us. So having time to sit with myself, look inwards. And what started to happen is I'd be either sitting in my bed on my phone watching TV or sitting on the couch, basically anytime I was relaxing. What would start happening is I would start seeing pictures in my head, so like my mind's eye, and they'd be flashing really quickly. I always describe it as pretend you are flipping through the TV channels and you can't decide what you want to watch, but you let it flash onto the channel long enough to see what's playing and then hurry up and click to the next one. It was like this on repeat over and over and over again. And I had never experienced this before. And I truthfully was like, what the F? I thought I was going crazy. I would start to feel really overwhelmed from all the pictures and I couldn't focus on one. And it was really weird to not be able to focus on a thought. Like that had never happened to me, or like a picture. And I would get really overwhelmed. I'd get a headache and then I'd start crying. So, like I said, I thought I was going crazy. This happened about 3 or 4 times, and my fiance would ask, "Are you okay? What's going on? Like, how can I help?" And I would just say, "I don't know. I think my anxiety is just really bad today. I suffer from anxiety and depression, or have in the past." And at the time, like I said, I thought I was crazy. And the other part of me was like, maybe this is a weird way my anxiety is manifesting now. So kind of left it at that. Well, the 5th time it happened, I really had a breakdown. So I finally told my fiance what's going on. I didn't want him to think I was crazy, but I know he's so supporting, and he was really concerned at this point because it was like the 5th time in the week that I said I was getting really overwhelmed and then would cry. So he was pretty concerned about me. So I finally told him what was going on, and he just consoled me and was like, maybe it's your anxiety. Like, you want to talk to somebody, like just being very supportive. So I was like, no, like, I don't know yet. And we kind of just left it at that. I think it was a couple days later, I had reached out to my brother. Him and I were still talking, and I told him, like, I was feeling so sad. I don't know what's going on. I was telling him kind of what happened. And then I started talking about when I was in Ireland. So a year before lockdown, I was in Ireland for 2.5 months doing my student teaching. And when I was in Ireland, I chose to do a deep dive on my spirituality. So I knew I was going for 2.5 months. I knew I'd be by myself. I was going to be student teaching, and it was going to be the first time in my entire life since I was old enough to work that I wasn't going to be working. So I wrote down some goals, and those goals were to fuel myself with nutritious food, to do yoga at least 3 times a week, to meditate every day, to get outside more and walk, and to just enjoy myself. And so basically what happened when I was in Ireland is all of those. I ended up doing yoga, meditating daily. I would go on walks. I didn't have a car, so I would actually walk to and from the school I was student teaching at. And then I would also be home from school by 1:30 every day. I was teaching kindergarten, and they were on like half days. So I had so much time to myself. It was beautiful. So I also got really into walking, and I would walk like 13 to 15 miles on the weekends. After school, I'd sometimes walk like 6 to 7. But the crazy thing is, on all these walks, there was a spiritual store in the main town I was in. I was in Ennis. If anybody knows of Ennis, it's a beautiful, nice little town. Everybody's so sweet there. There was a spiritual store that I walked by every day when I went on my walks. And I can't even remember the name of the store because they had the word Reiki really big on the store. And I remember seeing this word, and I was like, Reiki? What's Reiki? And that was it. I was always drawn to it. Every time I walked by, I'd like stop and stare at the store, and I'd stare at that word. Then that was a couple of weeks. Then I would start walking into the store, and I'd look around, and they'd have the normal metaphysical spiritual store things. They had crystals, they had books, they had tarot decks, they had incense, other occult things. And I would never buy anything because I was only in there to ask about Reiki. I wanted to ask, what's Reiki? And I never did. But I continued to walk by this store and stop and stare at it on every single one of my walks. And I went into the store countless times. Like, I'm sure the woman who ran the store knew who I was and was like, what are you doing? She probably knew. But anyway, I never did Reiki in Ireland, but I was interested about it, or my interest sparked there. It was the first time I saw the word, first time I'd ever heard of Reiki. So basically, I was telling my brother, I think I really need to get back into my spirituality. I think I need to do yoga. I think I need to meditate and go on these long walks because I was feeling so good. It was the happiest I've ever been in my life. And he was like, yeah, you should. And then I had a thought. I'm like, you know what? I've wanted to do Reiki for a year now. I'm going to do it. So I signed up for Reiki and had my first Reiki session. It was beautiful. It was with a woman in Nebraska. And I just remember it was an hour-long session, and I sat up and I was like, I feel so at peace. I had a lot of messages come through during that time, during that session. It was great. But that night I had a really bad headache, really, really bad. And then I slept for like 13 hours. I woke up the next morning, and it was the first time I had felt like myself in years. I'm covered in chills even saying that because I've struggled with anxiety and depression. I used to say it started my freshman year of high school. Being older now and looking back at my childhood, I realized it started way, way earlier than that. So it was the first time since I can't even explain. Like, I have no idea how young I was when this started, but it felt like I was me again. And I just remember after I realized that, it was the first time in my life that I knew that I had to learn Reiki. It was the first thing in my entire life that I was like, this is what I am meant to do. I am meant to learn this and I am meant to help heal other people in this way. So that day, I texted the woman that I did the Reiki session with the day before, and I just asked her, you know, I really want to learn Reiki. I told her everything that I just told you guys, and I'm like, I know I'm meant to learn this. I can't explain it, but I know I'm meant to. And I was like, who do I learn Reiki from? I have no idea. This is all so new to me. And she was like, actually, I can teach you. So I ended up learning Holy Fire 3 Reiki from her. And that began my Reiki journey. Now, kind of rewinding back to that session, that Reiki session I had, she was the first person I told. I was like, listen, this really crazy, weird thing keeps happening to me where I'm seeing pictures flying through my mind and I get a headache and I get really overwhelmed and I start crying. And she was like, yeah, you're a medium. And I was like, what? I just kind of like stared at her and she was like, you're connecting with spirit and they're showing you pictures. And she's like, basically what's happening is you love to help people and you're a helping soul and now you're connecting. So the way she described it to me is basically when you first are tapping in, you don't know how to set boundaries, any of this. She's like, and spirit knows you want to help. Basically, all these spirits are attracted to you like a moth to a flame. So she told me you need to start setting boundaries. And I was like, what are boundaries? I knew nothing. So she helped me with that. And that was kind of that. Once I set boundaries, I wasn't really getting anything from spirit at all. So I learned Reiki with her, and that's when I kind of started getting more messages. But I would only get messages from spirit during Reiki. So during Reiki, I'd get messages from like the soul I was working on and their spirit guides, but then sometimes a message from a crossover loved one would come in. So I was fine with that. I'm like, I'm learning, I'm still connecting. This is great. Fast forward a little bit. I was invited to this event called Spirit and Coffee in Omaha, Nebraska. Basically, a medium in Nebraska holds this thing on the last Sunday of every month, and it's allowing spiritual people in the area to come together, share their experiences, and basically all of us just talk. So I was just excited to meet other people that were like-minded because sometimes it's hard to find very spiritual or woo-woo-y people in the Midwest. So I was thrilled. Had no expectations. I was like, I just can't wait to meet more people that are interested in this. So I show up and I meet the friend who invited me. And as soon as we walked into the building, I like blacked out. I got super lightheaded. I was freezing cold and she was talking to me, telling me a story. And then I remember like coming back too because I was not paying attention to what she was saying at all. And she was just kind of like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just having a really hard time focusing. And she kind of smiled at me because I think she knew what was going on. And she was like, okay, are you sure you're okay? I'm like, yeah. Shortly after that, I was still lightheaded. I was freezing cold after that. I mean, the coldest I think I've ever been in my life. I was literally shaking my entire body. And I was so uncomfortable because I was so cold and I just kept looking around the room. I just remember like looking at each person individually to see if they were shaking or like pulling their sleeves down or crossing their arms or pulling their sweaters, closer to them. I'm like, is anybody else cold? Nobody was cold. Finally, I had to say something. I'm like, is anybody else freezing? And I didn't even say it like that. I was like, is anybody else freezing? Because I was shaking so hard. And the woman who runs it was like, no, but you need to take a deep breath and ground down. And then I kind of started sharing my story. Well, Basically, I left that session or left Spirit and Coffee high on life because I was connecting with Spirit. What I didn't know about Spirit and Coffee is that the medium shares messages at the end of the story. So basically, I went into this fully open, no expectations, no boundaries set, so excited to meet people. And I walked into a room of about 20 people that were all there to receive messages. So I hence was shaking and lightheaded because there was so much energy and spirit in there. After that, it really boosted my confidence that I was able to do this. And I started doing practice sessions, which kind of leads me to today. I practice Reiki and mediumship. Right now, I am offering Reiki sessions and tarot card readings, and then I relay messages through Reiki. So I would like to say I'm still a developing medium for sure. I mean, I've really only been at this for a little over a year. So I actually did just open up practice sessions on my website where I'm going to just do $10 and do 30 minutes. I might bump up the time. I haven't decided yet, but for now, $10 for 30 minutes of me practicing. Because basically, I want to get to a point where I can offer medium readings as an offering too, instead of it combined into the Reiki sessions. Basically, also what happened after Reiki is I found a huge part of myself. My entire life, since I was as little as I can remember, like 3, I think is when you start forming memories, I wanted to help people. So I wanted to be a vet. I wanted to be a baby doctor. I wanted to be a baby nurse. I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to do music therapy, like whatever I could do to help. That was the job I wanted. So, of course, I went to college to initially do music therapy, and then I changed to elementary education and special education. After I learned Reiki, it was, like I said, the first time that I'd ever known on a soul level that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing on this planet. And it was really hard for me to go back to teaching after that. I loved teaching. I loved the kids. I loved being around the kids. But it wasn't what I was crazy super passionate about. Reiki and mediumship was, and helping people in that way. So I went back to work at the beginning of the school year, the 2020 school year, and that was a whirlwind too. And basically what started happening is I began to get extremely depressed again. I was so sad. I was so angry. I just wasn't good. I also ended up being exposed to COVID like 3 separate times. So I had to quarantine like 3 different times. So that's so many times, you guys. It just wasn't aligning. Looking back, it's like there were so many signs that I was just like, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. Basically, though, the last time I quarantined was in the very beginning of November. I quarantined for 2 weeks. During that 2 weeks, I'm like, you know what? Even though I'm quarantined, I was exposed, I was having symptoms. I was like, I am going to work on my business during this time. So I did sessions. I kind of posted in the spiritual like Facebook pages in my area asking people if they would do an hour and a half long Reiki sessions and mediumship sessions with me in return for like Facebook and Google reviews so I can get good reviews out there. I ended up having 10 sessions in 1 week. And it was fantastic. I was high on life. I was loving it. And then my quarantine came to an end. I had to go back to work. I walked in to my classroom the day after quarantine and had the biggest panic attack of my life. I walked into the room and it was just immediately like, ooh, like I couldn't breathe. It felt like literally I walked in and turned the lights on. It didn't even feel like the lights were on. And I couldn't breathe and I couldn't stop crying. So I had to text my principal and I don't think I texted her. I'm sorry. One of my coworkers walked in to say welcome back and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No." And she was like, do you need to take a minute? Like, you need to take care of yourself. And I'm like, I'll be okay. I just need to get it together. I had like literally maybe 15 minutes before kids started showing up. So I think that teacher went to let my principal know, and my principal came in and was basically like, are you okay? Are you going to be able to get it together? If not, I'm going to have you go home. And I was sitting there like trying to get it together, and I was like, I'm going to get it together. I feel so bad. I've been gone for 2 weeks and everybody's stressed. Like, everybody's overworked and tired and stressed out right now as teachers, and I just couldn't get it together. So she was like, I think you need to take the day. So I ended up going on FMLA leave after that for another 2 weeks, which led up to basically Christmas break. So I ended up being off for almost the whole month of, or however it worked out, it felt like I had Thanksgiving break, came back, I was quarantined for 2 weeks, and then I went back. It was December at that point, and then once I went on FMLA leave, it led up to Christmas break. I was having so much clarity that I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so unhappy. Like, I can't live life like this. I was coming home with zero energy just because I was mentally drained from trying to keep my energy up all day and pretend to be happy in a place I was not. And I actually had my resignation letter, had a nannying job lined up to go in Nebraska, and I didn't do it. I let fear take over. I was like, I'm fearful of money. I'm fearful that I need insurance. I am going to get my teacher's license revoked. Like, all these things. I was like, I can't do it. So I didn't do it. So I go back to work January to March, which brings me to spring break. I came to visit my best friend in California for spring break. I was like, I need to get out. I need to be in the sun. The ocean's calling me. I have to go. So I asked my friend if I could come see her, and she was like, absolutely. It had been 2 years since we were in California together. 2 years before then, when we had gone together, it was actually the first time I'd ever visited California. And I absolutely, excuse my language, fucking loved it. I had been to the ocean in Florida before. I'd been to the ocean in Ireland, but this was so different. I landed, I got off the plane, there was sun, there was palm trees, there's ocean, there's still mountains here. And I was just glowing the whole trip. I just remember thinking I need to move out here now. And I didn't then, because same thing, fear. So I came to visit her. And the first night I was here, I had the craziest spiritual experience of my life. Basically, I had been holding in that I needed to quit my job and how unhappy I was, and I shared all of this with her, and it was like, as soon as I said it out loud, you guys, I'm not even kidding, I watched the room get brighter. It was like the lights were brighter. Like, I felt lighter. Like, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in 8 months. I was like, oh my gosh, why have I been holding this in for so long? And it was like, as soon as I said it, Spirit was like, we're here for it. Like, this is what we've been waiting for you to realize. So I ended up I was just the most connected I think I've ever been to this point in my life. I was in the Akashic Records. I was seeing my life, like my previous lives, the rest of my life going forward. I could see parts of my friend's life who was sitting with me. I could see my family's, and I just remember sitting there like looking in awe, because it was like flashing around the room is like the way I saw the Akashic Records. Like, think ethereal, like blue lines, but like old picture film is the way I was seeing it. And it was just like unrolling, and I could see all these lifetimes. And I was like, oh my God. I just remember saying, it's all planned out, isn't it? It's all planned out. I'm like, how can we judge anybody? It's all planned out, and we're all at different parts of this long planned out journey, but we all go through the same journey. So that was like really, really good for me. And basically, I also at that point realized that I was worthy enough to pursue Reiki to help people heal, because it's my dream, it's my purpose on earth, and that I could do that, and I deserve to make a living off of it. And I was just like, there's no way that I can pretend and go back. I can't pretend anymore. I'd been pretending for 8 months and it was slowly like killing me. I could see my spirit guides dancing and like twirling like ribbony wands, and I heard this like ethereal, like heavenly music. Like I can't even describe it. It was the most beautiful music. And my guides were like clasping their hands and throwing them over their shoulders, like back and forth, like yippee, yippee. But they kept saying, rejoice, 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 rejoice. We've waited many lifetimes for this. And my friend, at that moment that my guides were doing that in my mind's eye, my friend sitting in front of me clasped her hands, threw them over her shoulder, threw her head back and said, rejoice, just like that. And I mean, that is a word, until that day, that is a word that neither her or I used frequently. And I just remember staring at her like, oh my God, like you're tapped into this moment right now. Like that, it was just further proof to me. So while I was on that trip, I actually put in my 2 weeks at my teaching position. I ended up, and it's so weird that this happened because as soon as I put my 2 weeks in, I had this weird feeling. I was like, something's going to happen and I am not even going to go back for like as long as I'm supposed to, because basically I put my 2 weeks in on a weekend. So I had all the spring break and then I would have had 1 week when I went back. And I just had this overwhelming feeling. I was like, something's going to happen and I am either going to only have to show up for a day or not at all. So I was flying back to Nebraska through Denver. Turns out the day that I'm supposed to leave, there's a huge snowstorm in Denver. I get stuck in California for like 4 extra days. So basically, I ended up only having to go back to work for 2 days. And I know that that was a gift from Spirit because I don't think I could have done it longer than that. I was just so beat down and tired, and before the California trip, I was realizing, like, I was pretending and I was able to pretend, but after everything that I came to the realization and the clarity I got in California, the 2 days that I did have to go back were exhausting. So basically, that leads us to today. I ended up moving to California because it's where I'm happiest, and I know I can pursue my dreams anywhere, but I know that California is where my soul is at home. So now I'm out here in Huntington Beach, following my dreams of helping people heal through Reiki and mediumship and just being in contact with spirit. Thank you guys so much for listening to all of this. Thank you for listening to my story. This is what has gotten me up to today. I can't wait to share more about all things spiritual with you on this podcast and to start asking for some guests to come join my podcast. This is crazy. It's I have to say it's 11:33. I've been seeing angel numbers all day, and this podcast is something I've been manifesting for a year. So thank you for being a part of it.